Hello YouTube, this is Zack, and welcome to my channel, Zack Music, and this will be the first video in a series that I'm calling Crash Course in Music Theory. This video does have an intro, so if you haven't watched that intro, you might want to pause the video, go watch the intro, and then come back. Anywho, the stuff that we're going to be learning today, I think, is very simple. But just because it's simple doesn't mean that it is easy to comprehend and fully digest and be able to do on your own easily without having to think much about it. I'm going to essentially be taking 2 semesters or something, I don't know, of intro to music theory or whatever, and cramming them into like 30 minutes, essentially, with this series. So if this is new information for you, there's going to be things that you've never heard before. There's going to be things that you're not going to understand immediately. So when stuff like that comes up, what you're going to do is you're going to scroll down, and there in that description box down there, I'm going to have some more resources and some links and some descriptions and all that good stuff. So that should help you to understand some of the stuff that you don't understand immediately. Also, be sure to like my wonderful channel and subscribe. You can turn on the notifications. You can share things on Facebook and Instagram. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, Zack Music for both of them. You should totally do all that. Anyway, today we are learning about what an octave is, what the chromatic scale is, what whole steps are, whole steps and half steps, and then we're going to try to cram in the major scale at the end of all that. That is a lot of stuff. So let's get started. Sound. What is sound? It's a glorious question. Sound is a wave of some sort. I'm not really a physics guy, so I can't get really too far into this, but sound travels in waves. I'm sure everyone on the planet has heard the term sound waves. And as a wave, you can measure its frequency. And we measure that in hertz. So, for example, an A4, that's a note in music. You can find it on a piano. You can find it on a guitar. An A4. That note has the frequency of 440 hertz. And if I understand what a hertz is correctly, which I totally might not, I think that means that in 1 second, this wave goes through its little cycle thing 440 times. Okay? So now we're going to introduce this new thing called an octave. What the crap is an octave? It's really a musical term, but I'm going to try to kind of apply it here in like a physics way. So when that frequency gets exactly doubled, say from 440 to 880, it is a repetition of the same note. I'm not sure if that made any freaking sense at all. So let me explain. So A4 is 440 hertz. A5 is 880 hertz. A3 is 220 hertz. So when you cut it in half or when you double it, you get another A. And you can do this with any frequency, with any note. When you double it or when you cut it in half, you get that same frequency, that same note, just at a higher frequency. And if you think about it, this makes sense. I'm not much of a physics guy, like I said. But if you think about it, if the frequency of one note is exactly double another note, then they will like the 2 waves of of one will fit into one wave of another one, and the peaks will kind of be in the same place. It makes sense for them to kind of line up that way. So from 440 to 880, we have some stuff going on, some changes, some weird stuff going on. But after that, after the 880, it just starts repeating itself. And the same could be said for 220 and 440. From 220 to 440, we have some stuff going on. We got to figure out what that is. But after that, it just starts repeating itself. And that's how octaves work. That's this thing that we call octaves. Anyway, in Western music, we take that octave, that distance from one A to another A, or from one G to another G, whatever, and we divide it up into 12 different notes. Okay? After we get done with those 12, they just start over, like I said. So there are essentially 12 notes in the universe. Of course, that is a gross overstatement, but in most of the music that is played in the world, yes, we divide the octave up into 12 notes. Now, 7 of those notes we represent with letters as such. We can go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. And then after that second A, it would just go B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. It would just keep going up like that. So 7 of those 12 notes can be represented by letters. That's how we do it. But there's 5 more. Like I said, there's 12 altogether. So those other 5 actually occur between some of those letter represented notes. And this is where things get a little weird, because each of those other notes, those other 5 that are kind of between some other letter represented notes, have 2 names. All right, so let's get started. Between A and B, there's a note. You could call that A sharp. What does sharp mean? Sharp means like higher than, like bring it up, like it's above A. A sharp is the one above A. And then there's a note above C. called C sharp. That's the note between C and D. And then there's a note between D and E that's called D sharp. And there's a note between F and G that's called F sharp. Between G and A, you have G sharp. Between A and B, you have A sharp. Notice that there is not a note between E and F. It goes straight from E to F. Notice there is not a note from B to C. It goes straight from B to C. Why did they do it that way? I have no idea, but that's how somebody a long time ago decided to do it, and we've been doing it ever since. You do need to remember this. You need to remember B, C, E, F, E, F, B, C. Somehow you need to remember that there's no note between E and F and B and C. So just as each of those in-between notes can be represented as a sharp, meaning they can be represented as a note above another note. So A sharp is the note above A. C sharp is the note above C. They can also be represented as the note below something. So the note below B is called B flat. Flat. And I'm pretty sure that I draw half of my flats wrong in this video, but that's totally okay. I kind of make them look like B's. They're not really supposed to be B's. It's like a line with like half a heart thing going on, but I think I just kind of drew them like lowercase b's. Anywho, the note below B is called B flat. The note above A is called A sharp. Yes, those notes are the same note. It is a note with two names. In the same way, the note below D can be referred to as D flat. It's the same as C sharp. So, if you wanted to represent those in-between notes with sharps, your 12 notes would look like this. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. And then it would just keep going. A sharp, B. It would just keep going up like that. If you wanted to do the same thing with flats, you would have A, B flat, B, C, D flat, D, E flat, E, F, G flat, G, A flat, A. And then it would just keep going. It would just cycle over and over and over again. Now, a lot of people would refer to what I just spelled out as the chromatic scale. I think that doesn't actually make a lot of sense because typically a scale has like a function. It's an order of notes that you use for a certain thing in a certain way. And the chromatic scale is really just it's just how we divide the octave. It's just all the notes in the universe. But this is something you might hear, so I figured we'd go ahead and call it what a lot of people call it, the chromatic scale. So there's all 12 of the notes that we use in Western music and most of the music that gets a lot of attention today. Now we are moving to a new subject called whole steps and half steps, or half steps and whole steps. I don't remember what I wrote. Anywho, a step is a distance between two notes. It's a distance. And a half step is half of that distance. So when I go from one note to the next note over, either up or down, it doesn't matter, that is a half step. When I go from one note 2 notes over, that is a whole step. So if I'm at C and I go up to C sharp, that's the very next note, the one right next to it. That is a half step. But if I keep going on to D, from C to D would be a whole step because I have to go C, C sharp, D. That's 2 over. That's 2 to the right, so to speak, or 2 higher. So you just have to remember that. A half step is one motion, one change, one switch, whatever, higher or lower. A whole step is 2. So let's do some examples. If you're going to go from C to D, or from D to E, or from E to F, are you moving in half steps or whole steps? Well, C to D is a whole step because you go from C to C sharp and then from C sharp to D. That's 2 whatevers. That's 2 half steps. From D to E, you're going to go from D up to D sharp up to E. So that's another set of 2. That's a whole step. From E to F, it looks kind of the same because it's just 2 letters. But we remember that there's no note in between E and F. So actually you go straight from E to F. So that is a half step. Let's do a couple more examples. If we were to go from, say, E flat to F, or from G flat to G, or from C sharp to D, what would those be? Would those be half steps or whole steps? Of course, there's both involved. From E flat to F is a whole step because you're going E flat to E, that's 1, E to F, that's 2. So that's a whole step. From G flat to G, that is a half step because G flat is the note right next to G. From C sharp to D, that is another half step because C sharp is the note right next to D. So I hope that we have understood half steps, whole steps. This whole step business is pretty simple. It's just a distance. A half step is 1. A whole step is 2. So now we are moving on to the last subject that we were going to cover in this video. which is the major scale. Now, a scale, like I said, this isn't exactly a technical definition, but it's going to be our working definition for the moment. A scale is a sequence of notes that serves a certain purpose, that we do something with, that there's a reason for it existing, something like that. That's our definition of scale. Anywho, a major scale consists of a note, and then the note a whole step after that, and then the note a whole step after that, and then a half step, and then a whole step, and then a whole step, and then a whole step, and then a half step. I'm going to repeat that. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So let's start. Let's do an example. So let's start with C. The first note of your scale is obviously going to be C. We can call that the root note. So you're going to start with C, and you're going to go a whole step. That brings you to D. Then you're going to go another whole step. That brings you to E. Then you're going to go a half step. That brings you to F. Then you're going to go another whole step. That brings you to G. Another whole step will bring you to A. Another whole step will bring you to B. And then a half step will bring you back to C, which is where you started. So it's an 8-note sequence. There's 7 different notes because the first note and the 8th note are the same. There's one common error I want to correct right now. So for me, my brain would never even think to do this, but I've just taught for so long that I know that people, like, when they first start out, they start doing this. The whole step and the half step, these are distances between notes. They are not themselves notes. So people will be like, all right, C, that's the whole step. D, that's the whole step. E, that's the half. And that's not how this goes. From C to D, that's a whole step. From D to E, that's a whole step. From E to F is a half step. That's how that goes. So make sure that you don't confuse yourself. So let's do another example. Let's do E major. We're going to do our E major scale, which means we're going to start from E and then go a whole step, a whole step, a half step, a whole step, a whole step, a whole step, a half step. 2 wholes, half, 3 wholes, half. So we start with E. Go a whole step up, that brings you to F sharp. A whole step up, that brings you to G sharp. A half step will bring it to A. A whole step will bring it to B. A whole step will bring it to C sharp. A whole step will bring it to D sharp. A half step will bring you to E. That is your E major scale. E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E. Now, let's do another one. I'm going to have you guys do a little bit of self-discovery. I want you to see something. Let's do an F major scale, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to start with F and then go whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Now, a lot of people, when they do this for the first time, they do it like this. They go F, G, A sharp, C, D, E, F. That's how they do it. But then this looks kind of weird, does it not? You have A and then A sharp and then C. A sharp, C. That looks kind of weird because there's 2 A's and no B, right? 2 types of A's. There's like an A and an A sharp. That's sort of, in some weird kind of way, 2 types of A's. And there's no type of B. There's not a B. There's not a B flat. None of that. So this would make a little bit more sense if we, instead of wrote A sharp, if we wrote B flat, it would make a lot more sense. Then we would have 1 A and 1 B and 1 C. A, B flat, C. And that looks better on sheet music, and that works better with a lot of musical paradigms. So that's why some scales are written with sharps and some scales are written with flats, so that there's one of every note, that it just kind of goes up like that. To give you another example, we could do it in E flat. If you were to try to write E flat, the E flat major scale, with sharps, you would get something really weird. You would get E flat, F, G, G sharp, A sharp, C, D, D sharp. And that's really weird because you started on E flat and you ended on D sharp. That's really freaking weird. So that G sharp, let's make it an A flat. That A sharp, let's make it a B flat. And that D sharp at the end, well, that doesn't make any sense. Let's call it an E flat. This is the E flat major scale after all, so it should end on E flat. So if we do that, it reads E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D, E flat, which works with a lot of musical paradigms much better than E flat, F, G, G sharp, A sharp, C, D, D sharp. That just no one likes that. That's bad. Don't do that ever. And with this corrected E-flat major scale, we have finished today's lesson. So today, what did we learn? We learned about the octave, what an octave is, what the chromatic scale is, or how we divide up that octave. We learned about half steps and whole steps. We learned about the major scale. At our next lesson, we're going to learn about intervals, which are distances between notes, bigger than half steps and whole steps. Or that can be bigger than half steps and whole steps. We're going to talk about triads, which is another thing. We're going to talk about sevenths, which is another thing. So don't forget to like me and subscribe to me and turn on notifications and talk about me on Facebook and Instagram and make me famous and all that kind of good stuff. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more stuff. In the future, we're going to be talking about jazz. We're going to be talking about improv. We're going to be talking about songwriting and harmony writing and all sorts of cool stuff. We got a lot of cool stuff in the works. So stay tuned, and thanks again for watching.